All right. Good day to you, Spartans. We're going to get into a new unit. This is Module 3 of Algebra 1. We are skipping over Module 2. We finished Algebra 1, Module 1. We're now in Module 3, Lesson 1. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to sequences. So real quick, I want you guys to think of this sequence of numbers. Now, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then the dot, dot, dot that you see going on right there, that just means that this sequence goes on forever and ever and ever. There is no end, but what I want you guys to do is I want you to think about what the next number will be. And right here in this space right here, I want you guys to put what you think the next number might be. You might think this is a 5. If you put a 5 here, I want you to tell me why you think it's going to be 5. If you think this is going to be a 10, I want you to tell me why you think it's going to be a 10. If you think it's going to be a 2, I want you to write a 2 here and then tell me where you think it's going to, why you think it's going to be a 2 right there, okay? That's what I'm looking for in this section right here, okay? So, take a minute, do that, pause the video, do that, and then come back and we'll continue talking, okay? Again, if you don't have some stuff in that spot right there, you're not going to get credit when I grade this the next day. Are we clear on that? So, let's move on. Now, some possible answers that you might have come through to continue the sequence that we talked about are right here. Okay? Some of you might have decided to continue by adding 2 every time, because if we look up here, I started at 2, and then how did I get to 4? Well, one way is to add 2. And can I do the same thing to get to 6? Oh yeah, because 2 plus 4, well, really 4 plus 2 is 6, and then 6 plus 2 is 8. Well, how do I get 10 from 8? Well, I take 8 and I add 2 to it. And to get to 12, I add 2 to it. And to get to 14, I add 2 to it. And to get to 16, I add 2. To get to 18, I add 2. So, how do I describe these? Well, to get to the next term in the sequence, I add 2 every time. So that's how I got 2, or that's how I got these next numbers, is by adding 2 every time. Okay? Now, this was another possible outcome, right? Notice that? Look at this. I'm going to erase the plus 2's here so you can see it more clearly. But what happened from here down to here? It looks like I am just repeating the same sequence every time. It started 2, 4, 6, 8, and then I circled back and repeated 2, 4, 6, 8, and then I did it one more time right there. So, my rule is I repeat 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay? So these are a couple possible scenarios, and you might have had another, but remember, up here, you were supposed to write down what you thought your next number was going to be right here, and then what you did to get that next number. And then the same thing here. What your next number is going to be, and what you did to get that next number. So I want you to turn to the next page. And I am going to define the term sequence now. A sequence is a list of numbers that follows a pattern. Okay? So we'll need to know that. We need to know that a sequence is a list of numbers that follows a pattern. Now we're going to define a specific sequence. This sequence can give me the next number by taking the previous number and multiplying it by 2. So, for example, this sequence right here, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. I'm going to make my pen skinnier so I can fit this in here. Now, I started at 1 and I got to 2. One way to multiply, or to get to 2, is to multiply this by 2. 1 times 2 equals 2. So that works. Well, what is 2 times 2? Does that get me 4? It does. I take 2, I multiply it by 2, and it gets me 4. How do I go from 4 to 8? I take 4 and I multiply it by 2, and I get 8. From 8 to 16, I take 8, I multiply it by 2, and I get 16. From 16, I take 16, I multiply it by 2, and I get 32. What do you think my next number would be? I take 32, and what do I do to it? Pause the video and figure out what you do. So I want a number right here, and then whatever that next number would be, I want you to write it right here. Okay? I'm not going to put this in here. I want you to figure out what you do in this spot and what you get in this spot. Okay? So now we're going to go to the next page. How about this sequence? We create the next number by taking the previous number and adding 3 to it. So here, I'm going to do this in green. I start at 4. I add 3, and I need skinnier line again. I add 3 to 4, and 4 plus 3 is 7, right? And then I take 7. I add 3 to it, and that gives me 10. I take 10. I add 3 to it, and I get 13, because 10 plus 3 gets me 13. Then I take 13. I add 3 to it, and that gets me 16. Now, again, I got 16. What do I do to 16 to get me that next number? So, I want you to put down a number in there, or what I do right here in your notes. And then I want you to tell me what the next number would be. Okay? Pause the video and fill in these two spots. These two spots. If you don't, you won't get credit for doing the notes. Now that you're back, we are going to graph these numbers on the number line. This here, I'm going to do this in blue. I'm going to do it in skinny line. This here is my first number. This is my second number. And this is my third number. This is my fourth number. This is my fifth number. However, to make my graphing easier, I am going to subtract 1 from each of these numbers. Okay? And you'll see why in a second. But what that does for me is it makes these 1 less. So I'm going to erase this blue circle, and I'm going to erase my numbers here. So instead of this being my first number, instead of 4 being my first number, I'm going to call it my 0th number. And then 7 becomes my first number. That makes 10 my second number. It makes 13 my third number. And it makes 16 my fourth number. And then this number would be, or I'm sorry, not that number. Not that. This is my fourth number. This is my fifth number. And what we're going to do is I have my x-axis is going to be the stuff I have written in blue right here. Okay? So when x is 0, this is my x. So when x is 0, my sequence is 4. So I am going to graph the point 0, 4. So I go to the 0 spot on my x-axis and I go up to 4. And here's where I put my dot. And I'm going to put a green dot there. I'm going to make that green. So 0, 4 right there. Okay? And now my first term, again, when x equals 1, right here, my sequence number is 7. So I'm going to put a green dot on 1, 7. So 1 is right here. So I go over 1 and then up 7. And that's where I'm going to put my dot. So let me turn this to green and put my dot right there. Now when x is 2, when x is 2, right here, my y, I'm going to start calling it y now, is 10. So down here, I graph the point 2 over 2 and up 10 right here. You see where the 10 is? That's where I go, right where I'm hovering the little circle. So I'm going to get my green. I'm going to put a dot there on 210. And then for 3, when x is 3, so right here, right there, I got a y equal to 13. So the point I'm going to graph is 3, 13. Again, go over, start at the origin, go over to 3, and up to 13. And that's where I'm going to put my dot. And then I'm going to do that for 4 and 5 as well. Actually, you do 4 and 5. You tell me where how high up the number 4 should be and how high up the number 5 should be. Remember, this is your fourth number and this is your fifth number. Okay. Now, what you'll notice is when you do that, you're going to get a line. It's going to look very straight. It's going to look like that. It's a line. And if you remember, the equation for this line, we're going to do what we call slope-intercept form. Who remembers what slope-intercept looks like? It was y equals mx plus b. And what was b? That was our y-intercept. And x, do that in red, that was our slope. Now, to find my y-intercept, I simply look at where this line crosses the y-axis. And remember, the y-axis is the one that goes up and down right here. And my line crosses the y-axis right at that point, so at 0, 4. So my y value is 4. So I'm going to replace b with 4, because 4 is my y-intercept. I'm going to keep the x. Now I have to find the slope. The slope here, if you remember, was defined m equals rise over run. So let's think about what that means. When I say when I ask what my rise is, I'm asking how far up does it go compared to how far over it goes. Here, this thing goes up 1, 2, 3 every time it goes over 1. So my rise is plus 3, and my run is plus 1. So to find my slope, let me not scroll down quite so much. My slope, m, equals plus 3 divided by plus 1. And this is the same thing as 3 divided by 1, which is 3. So I'm going to replace the m here with 3. And now we have a formula for this sequence. Now, oops, undo that. Now if I asked you, what is the 30th term for this sequence? Or in other words, when x equals 30, what is y? So when x equals 30, very simply, I stick 30 into my equation. So y, I'm going to do this all in black, y equals 3 times 30 plus 4. And then all I have to do is simple math. So y equals 3 times 30 is 90, and I keep the plus 4, and then 90 plus 4 is 94. So there you have it, part 1 in the books.